Officer Derek Hargrove wore a smug half-grin, while 18-year-old Ava Morgan insisted her mom worked special operations. Her wrists, cuffed too tight, were already bleeding as the mall cameras rolled. Then, the doors slid open. Before we get into how this went sideways fast, where are you watching from? Comment your city, hit like, and subscribe. On a bright Saturday in suburban Atlanta, Ava Morgan moved through Westfield Mall like she always did, focused, calm, and prepared. Her NASA tee and natural puff matched the quiet confidence of a top student. She mentally recited AP chemistry requirements, already picturing the research career she wanted. Today's mission was simple: parts for a solar conversion experiment. Ava stepped into Electromax, the upscale electronics shop tucked between luxury storefronts, and followed her list item by item. She didn't notice the clerk's suspicious stare at first. A middle-aged white man with a permanent scowl hovered behind her, fixing shelves she hadn't touched. Each time she explained her project, he watched harder, not softer. Near the smartphone display, a sharply dressed woman with salon-highlighted hair suddenly panicked, dumping her designer bags on the counter. "My iPhone is missing!" she yelled, loud enough to drown out the mall music. $2,000. Gone. Shoppers turned. The clerk stiffened like he'd been waiting for a reason. Ava froze, feeling a tension snap toward her. The woman, Heather Caldwell, jabbed a finger at Ava. "It was her! She's been hovering forever." Manager Trent Lawson appeared instantly and nodded along without checking a thing. Two security guards rushed in like it was rehearsed. One seized Ava's right arm, the other clamped her left. Ava tried to speak, but they talked over her. "There's a mistake," Ava said, voice steady even as her chest tightened. Check my bag, I'm here for school." The guards ignored her, muttering into a radio about another one boosting electronics. Their grips tightened as they steered her towards the security office. Ava felt humiliation flare, hotter than the pain, because everyone was watching. They marched her past families and teenagers filming TikToks like she was already guilty. Inside the cramped security room, hostile faces circled. Minutes later, Officer Derek Hargrove from Atlanta PD strode in, hand resting casually near his holster. He didn't look at Ava first. He looked at the manager, like the decision was already made. "What have we got?" Hargrove asked. Lawson puffed up. "Caught her stealing a customer's phone. High-end model." Ava tried again, controlled and polite. "Sir, I didn't take anything. I'm an AP student." "Call my teacher, Mr. Keller. He can verify my assignment." Hargrove's eyes stayed cold. "Sure, heard that before." Hargrove ordered her to empty her pockets and bag. When Ava complied, he dumped everything on the table like it was trash. Components, notebook, careful notes, even her school certificate. Nothing looked like a phone. His jaw hardened anyway. "Where'd you hide it?" he snapped. Ava held her posture. "There's no evidence because I did nothing." Ava pointed out the obvious next step: security footage. Heather Caldwell snorted, "She probably has help. People like that work in groups." The racist edge hung in the air, unchallenged. Hargrove nodded like it was common sense. Then he pulled out handcuffs. "Until we sort this out, you're detained." Metal bit into Ava's wrists. The cuffs were cinched far too tight. Ava winced as the edges cut skin and drew beads of blood. "They're too tight," she said quietly. "They're cutting me." Hargrove pretended not to hear. Mall staff watched like this was entertainment. Ava inhaled slowly, remembering what her grandmother taught. Stay calm, speak clearly, give them nothing extra. I want to call my mother, Ava said. It's my right. Hargrove raised an eyebrow, dripping sarcasm. And who's your mother? Somebody famous. Ava met his stare without flinching. Colonel Tessa Morgan, U.S. Army Special Forces. She's stationed at the Pentagon. The room erupted in laughter, led by Hargrove's mocking snort. Yeah, and my dad's the president, Hargrove sneered. His emphasis carried ugly undertones. Making up fairy tales won't help you. Ava didn't argue. She let his words stain the room. After a beat, he shrugged theatrically. Fine. Call her. Let's hear this colonel. He unlocked Ava's phone and held it like a prop. Ava recited the number with dignity, even as blood slicked her wrists. The call rang. Hargrove smirked, expecting a dead end. Ava didn't blink. She knew exactly who would answer. And how fast. Around her, the security guards leaned in, ready to laugh again. Ava stayed silent, letting the ringing fill the room like a countdown. At the Pentagon, Colonel Tessa Morgan sat upright in a secure briefing, eyes on satellite imagery and threat projections. 2 decades of service had taught her to compartmentalize chaos into clarity. Her phone vibrated, normally ignored. This time something felt wrong. She glanced down, saw Ava's name, and a sharp line of concern cut through her professional calm. Tessa excused herself with quiet authority. Generals nodded, recognizing that tone. In the hallway, she answered, voice instantly shifting from commander to mother. Ava, what's happening? On the other end, Ava kept control, but Tessa heard the strain under it. Background noise told her daughter wasn't in class. A mother doesn't need extra evidence. I'm detained at Westfield Mall, Ava said, accused of stealing a phone. They cuffed me and won't check footage. They're laughing when I tell them who you are. Tessa's mind snapped into mission mode. Are you hurt? The cuffs are cutting. I'm bleeding. Ava added carefully, they're making assumptions about me. Rage rose in Tessa's chest. Controlled, weaponized, familiar. She'd carried the double burden her entire career, serving a country that didn't always serve her back. I'm coming, she said, clipped and certain. Stay calm, don't argue, say as little as possible. Ava exhaled, relieved but still trapped. Tessa ended the call already moving. She re-entered just long enough to hand off the briefing. Lieutenant Park will continue. Family emergency. No debate, no delay. In her office, she started making calls like she was building an extraction plan. Her hands were steady, but her eyes burned. This wasn't a drill. It was her daughter, brilliant, respectful, and bleeding in a mall security room. First call, her commander, General Adrian Cole. Sir, my daughter is being unlawfully detained at Westfield Mall. Possible racial profiling. I need emergency leave and support. Cole didn't hesitate. Go. Use whatever resources you need. Keep me updated. Tessa didn't thank him. She didn't have time. She moved to the next number immediately. She called Major Darren Price, JAG, a longtime friend. Meet me at Westfield. Bring what you need. Then Captain Sophia Ramirez, military police. Bring a medical kit. My daughter's cuffs are too tight. Tessa changed into civilian clothes, jeans, blouse, blazer, hiding her rank, but not her presence. Her anger stayed disciplined. As she drove through midday Atlanta traffic, old memories flashed like warning lights. Teachers doubting Ava's work, store guards tailing them, recruiters suggesting less competitive paths despite perfect grades. Each incident tightened the same knot. Tessa navigated lanes like routes on a tactical map, calculating time, exits, alternatives. Her jaw stayed set. Her hands stayed steady. Her fury stayed controlled. The drive also reminded her of the talks no parent should have to give. At 7, Ava learned, hands visible, voice calm, know your rights, don't move suddenly. Ava had asked, innocent and confused, but if I didn't do anything wrong, why would they stop me? Tessa remembered how hard it was to answer without breaking her daughter's light. She'd found a way anyway. Sometimes fear makes people reckless. Your job is to stay safe until the mistake gets corrected. Now, the lesson was real. Tessa pulled into the Westfield parking lot and positioned her car for a quick exit, like she was staging an operation. She texted rendezvous points to her team, then breathed once, deep. She called Major Price again. I'm going in first. Give me 5 minutes. I want to see how they treat me when they think I'm just another black mother. She tucked her military ID into her pocket, not visible yet. Civilian outfit, tactical posture. She checked her reflection, then straightened. Years of command lived in her shoulders. Clothes couldn't erase that. Inside, glass doors slid open and the mall swallowed her into noise and light. Tessa scanned like she always did. Cameras, exits, choke points, security posts. Guards near the entrance stood up straighter without understanding why. She followed signs to the security office at an unhurried pace, controlled breathing masking the storm inside her. This time, the enemy wasn't foreign. It was prejudice. Her phone buzzed with confirmations. Ramirez en route, Price closing in. Tessa's anger sharpened into focus. She'd faced gunfire without flinching, but the thought of her daughter bleeding under someone else's authority hit differently. She centered herself like before a mission. Assess, act, protect, document. Then she reached the security office door. It was closed, unlocked. She opened it. The room fell silent. Ava sat cuffed to a chair, wrists red and wet. Officer Hargrove loomed, smug posture unchanged. Manager Lawson hovered. Heather Caldwell sat in a corner scrolling her phone like nothing mattered. 2 guards flanked the door. Tessa met Ava's eyes, a wordless check-in. Ava gave the smallest nod. I'm okay, for now. I'm Tessa Morgan, Ava's mother, Tessa said, voice carrying command without raising volume. Remove those cuffs. Now! Hargrove barely looked up. Ma'am, she's detained for theft. We'll deal with restraints when we're done. He spoke like he expected submission. Tessa didn't give it. She stepped closer, gaze steady, tone measured like a briefing. Your restraints are causing visible injury, she said. You have no evidence. You deny due process, and you're violating policy regarding minors. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. And how would you know our policy? Tessa didn't answer with words. She reached into her pocket and placed her military ID on the table, angled so everyone saw the rank immediately. Colonel Tessa Morgan, U.S. Army Special Forces, she said, stationed at the Pentagon. Remove the cuffs before this escalates beyond your control. The air changed. Lawson shifted, uneasy. Heather Caldwell suddenly became fascinated by her manicure. The guards exchanged glances, sensing the power shift. Hargrove, stubborn, tried to hold ground. A military badge doesn't change procedure, he snapped. What procedure is that? Tessa asked, voice turning steel. The one that cuffs a minor without evidence? The one that ignores security footage? The one that tightens restraints until skin breaks? She turned slightly toward Lawson. Your store policy requires verification before detention. Has footage been reviewed? Lawson stammered. We had an eyewitness. Tessa pivoted toward Heather. Will you swear under oath? Before Heather could answer, the door opened and Major Darren Price stepped in, uniform crisp, briefcase in hand. Colonel, he said, professional and calm. I contacted Chief Samuel Ortega. He requested an immediate update for Officer Hargrove. Hargrove's face paled. A beat later, Captain Sofia Ramirez entered with a medical kit, eyes already on Ava's wrists. Medical support is standing by, she said. Tessa nodded once, then refocused on Hargrove. Start over, she said. Remove the cuffs. Provide medical attention. Then we review footage. Hargrove hesitated. Price stepped forward, polite, but sharp. Perhaps you didn't hear me, officer. Chief Ortega is personally expecting your call. Shall I dial him for you? Hargrove's bravado cracked. He moved toward Ava, keys in hand. The cuffs came off with a reluctant click, revealing angry gashes. Ramirez immediately cleaned, bandaged, and photographed the injuries with professional precision. Ava flexed her hands carefully, jaw tight, but posture controlled. Everyone in the room watched the blood, suddenly quiet. Hargrove avoided Ava's eyes. Then a ringtone cut through the silence. Bright, familiar, unmistakable from Heather Caldwell's purse. Heather scrambled, digging through her bag, and pulled out an iPhone identical to the stolen one. Color drained from her face as she silenced it. Too fast! Tessa's voice stayed calm, which made it worse. Is that the phone you accused my daughter of taking? Heather stammered about an honest mistake. Tessa gestured toward Ava's bandages. My daughter is bleeding. That's harm. Tessa didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You humiliated her publicly. You detained her without evidence. She looked at Hargrove. And you encouraged it. The room shifted again, now from surprise to fear. Fear of consequences. Outside, footsteps and murmurs grew as people gathered. Phones were up. Someone had recognized Ava from a school academic championship. The story was traveling faster than the truth usually did. The head of mall security, Neil Porter, suddenly appeared, sweating, offering cooperation after one call. Cameras and monitors flickered as footage loaded. Tessa pointed at the screen. Reverse playback showed Heather placing her phone into her own shopping bag minutes before the accusation. Price recorded the screen for evidence. Neil swallowed hard. No one spoke, because the video spoke clearly enough for everyone. Play it again, Price said, steady as a judge. The footage showed Heather glancing around, then choosing Ava, passing closer white teens like they were invisible. Tessa turned to Neil. Pull her incident history. Neil typed quickly, eyes widening as a profile populated. 7 similar complaints in 14 months, he said. All against shoppers of color. Price captured screenshots without comment. Ramirez stepped close to Tessa with her tablet. Officer Hargrove has 12 excessive force complaints, she reported. 9 involved minorities. All dismissed. Hargrove surged forward. That's confidential. Ramirez didn't blink. Patterns of civil rights violations trigger interagency review. Her tone sounded official enough to freeze him. Outside, more people gathered. Through the window, local news vans rolled in. Heather tried to stand and leave. Ramirez shifted subtly, blocking the door with polite firmness. We'll need a formal statement, she said. False reports are serious. At that moment, Chief Samuel Ortega entered. Older, composed, uniform marked by authority. His eyes hardened when they landed on Hargrove. I got a concerning call about a minor, he said. I see it wasn't exaggerated. Chief Ortega's expression softened when he looked at Ava. "Are you all right, young lady?" Before Ava could answer, Heather attempted to slip past in the distraction. Another officer stepped in, stopping her by name. "Ma'am, we have questions about similar incidents at North Lake and Perimeter." Heather's designer bag hit the floor with a thud. Her voice jumped to anger. "This is harassment. I was the victim." While attention snapped to Heather, Manager Lawson tried his own quiet escape. Price intercepted him smoothly. "We'll need every incident report involving theft accusations from your store for 2 years." Lawson protested about corporate property. Price didn't move. "Not when it intersects with a civil rights investigation." The medical technician who arrived with Chief Ortega checked Ava's wrists and confirmed bruising. No permanent damage, but documented injury. Chief Ortega turned back to Hargrove, voice hard. "Which procedure authorizes cuffs tight enough to draw blood?" Hargrove tried to defend himself. Ortega cut him off. "And where is your body camera footage?" Hargrove touched his chest automatically. "Malfunction," he muttered. Ramirez glanced at her screen. "Equipment check, logged it. Functional this morning." The room tightened. Hargrove's excuses were collapsing one by one. One of the original guards, Caleb Raines, stepped forward, nervous. "Sir, we were told by management to watch certain kinds of shoppers." Lawson exploded, denying it. Caleb swallowed and raised his phone. "I recorded the last staff meeting because it felt wrong." Ortega listened, frown deepening, then handed the audio to Price. The power dynamic fully flipped. The guards weren't muscle anymore. They were witnesses. A woman in an expensive suit entered, Dana Whitfield, counsel for Westfield Properties. She assessed the room in seconds, then faced Tessa. "We apologize. We'd like to offer an immediate settlement to avoid litigation." Tessa's stare didn't soften. "This isn't about money," she said. "Checks berry patterns. How many families without Pentagon connections went through this and got ignored?" Whitfield's practiced smile faltered. Ava, quiet until now, pointed at a live monitor still showing Electromax's back office. "Mom, look!" On screen, Lawson was at a computer, moving fast, eyes darting. Price snapped into action, calling it out. "Evidence tampering in progress." Mall security rushed on screen, stopping Lawson before he could complete whatever deletion he attempted. The tension changed from moral outrage to legal emergency. Every second suddenly mattered. In the footage, Lawson's hands flew across keys as he muttered about deleting sectors and time ranges. Price typed rapidly on his phone. "Preservation order requested. Any deletion becomes federal tampering." Moments later, Lawson's screen froze, replaced by a blunt message. "System locked by court order." In the security office, Lawson went pale. He wasn't just caught discriminating, he was caught trying to erase the proof. Heather's husband arrived, Gavin Caldwell, in a $1,000 suit and loud confidence. "This detention is unlawful," he announced. "My firm will file countercharges. You'll surrender recordings immediately." Chief Ortega remained calm. "Your wife was recorded planting evidence to accuse a minor," he said. "Choose your next words carefully." Price added, almost pleasant. "Attempting influence could be construed as obstruction." Gavin's swagger wavered. Outside, the crowd swelled. Videos of Ava being marched in handcuffs spread across social media within minutes, piling up views. People held phones like torches, demanding names and answers. Inside, Ava remained the calm center, NASA logo bright against the chaos. Multiple camera angles on the monitors showed Heather ignoring white teens and selecting Ava with intention. Each replay made the mistake story less believable. Hargrove fumed in the corner, hands twitching toward his belt before he caught himself. "This is out of proportion," he snapped. Chief Ortega didn't blink. "It's proportionate to the harm," he replied. The room felt smaller as more officers arrived, initially tense, then confused when they saw the chief, military personnel, and a bandaged teenage girl. Hargrove's authority had evaporated. Only his badge remained. Barely. Community leaders began filtering in after seeing the viral clips. A hush fell whenever someone recognized Ava from local academic awards. Heather tried again to claim victimhood, but witnesses in the crowd muttered back. People who'd watched her point, accuse, and smirk. Ramirez continued documenting injuries and statements like she was building a case file brick by brick. Tessa kept one hand near Ava, protective but composed, eyes scanning every reaction. Chief Ortega questioned Heather directly about the pattern of complaints. Heather's answers tangled into contradictions. Meanwhile, Price pressured Neil Porter for system logs and prior detainment records. Neil complied quickly, terrified of being seen as complicit. Whitfield attempted to redirect toward private resolution, but Tessa refused. "Transparency is what stops repeats," she said. "Privacy is how people hide this." The crowd outside roared when a reporter's camera light flashed on. Another officer stepped in with paperwork, quietly informing Heather she needed to remain for questioning. Heather's face tightened with panic, then shifted to outrage, like anger could erase evidence. Gavin Caldwell whispered into his phone, name-dropping judges and friends. But the room had moved past intimidation. Chief Ortega's presence was a wall. Tessa's presence was another. Heather finally realized she wasn't controlling the narrative anymore, and it showed. Lawson attempted to talk his way out, insisting store discretion and reasonable suspicion. Caleb Raines stared at the floor, ashamed. Another Electromax employee appeared at the doorway, voice shaky. "It's true," she said. "We were told to shadow certain customers and ignore others. I have emails." Whitfield's eyes narrowed, calculating damage. Tessa didn't gloat. She simply nodded. "Preserve everything," she ordered, like a commander securing a scene. The medical tech checked Ava again. Pulse, blood pressure, pupil response. "She's stressed," he noted, "but stable for now." Ava held her chin up, refusing to let anyone see her shake. Tessa leaned close and spoke softly. "You're doing great." Ava's eyes glistened, not from fear, but from anger finally having somewhere to land. The room was full of adults. Ava was the one forced to be strongest. Hargrove, cornered, tried to regain control. "We responded to a complaint," he insisted. Chief Ortega's stare was hard. "Then why didn't you review footage? Why didn't you loosen cuffs when she said she was bleeding?" Hargrove swallowed. "We were busy." Ortega's voice dropped. "Busy? Doing what?" "Proving your bias." Silence hit like a door slamming. Even the guards looked away from Hargrove now. Ortega extended his hand. "Your badge and weapon, now!" Hargrove blinked, stunned. "Chief, you can't." "I can and I am," Ortega replied. "Suspended pending investigation. Excessive force, failure to follow procedure, and falsifying equipment status." Hargrove's mouth opened, then closed. Slowly, like surrendering a limb, he handed over his badge, then his firearm. The click of metal was louder than any shout. The mall owner, Malcolm Benton, arrived with a tight face and a public relations smile that didn't fit the room. "What's going on? There are news vans outside." He spotted Ortega, then the uniforms, then Ava's bandaged wrists, and his expression shifted to fear. "This is a misunderstanding." Tessa cut him off. "False imprisonment and injury to a minor isn't inconvenience. It's liability and harm." Benton tried damage control, throwing out words like diversity and commitment. Tessa gestured toward the monitors showing Heather's deliberate setup. "Commitment is policy," she said, "and your policies did this." Price requested server access logs and detainment records across the mall. Neil Porter complied, hands trembling. Outside, chants rose as people made signs on the fly, "Justice for Ava," while cameras broadcast live. Benton suggested moving somewhere private. A new voice answered from the doorway, Reverend Isaiah Brooks, flanked by community leaders. "Private is how these stories die," he said. "Public is how patterns stop." The room felt crowded with purpose now. Even Caleb Raines looked relieved someone else was speaking truth. Whitfield's face tightened. A private settlement was slipping away. Tessa didn't look at the Reverend. She looked at Ava. "You're not alone," her eyes said. Ava noticed Lawson again on a monitor, still trying to manipulate systems before the lock. Price spoke quickly into his phone, confirming the preservation order had already triggered mirrored backups. "Every keystroke is logged," he said. Lawson's shoulders sagged on screen. In the security office, Electromax staff whispered, shocked. The routine theft detainment had become a documented civil rights case with media, community oversight, and multiple agencies watching. Whitfield tried one more time. "We can resolve this immediately with compensation." Tessa's voice stayed even. "Compensation doesn't rewrite policy. It doesn't undo what happened to my daughter." Ava's hands trembled slightly as adrenaline faded. Ramirez noticed and moved closer, quietly checking her vitals again. Tessa stayed upright, but her focus sharpened on Ava's breathing. A good commander knows when the mission changes. The mission was shifting to care. The technician frowned. "She's showing signs of shock, blood pressure dropping." Tessa's face tightened. "Call an ambulance," she ordered. No argument, no delay. Ortega nodded and signaled officers. Outside, sirens began weaving through traffic. Inside, Benton looked like he wanted to vanish. Gavin Caldwell paced, whispering threats into his phone. But they sounded thinner now. The room had moved beyond intimidation. It had moved into consequences. The ambulance team arrived and began assessing Ava professionally, preparing a stretcher. Ava tried to sit taller, fighting embarrassment at needing help after fighting so hard to stay composed. Tessa took her hand. "You don't have to prove strength right now," she murmured. Ava blinked back tears, not wanting cameras to capture weakness. Tessa didn't care about cameras. She cared about her daughter's pulse and the color in her face. Chief Ortega continued directing the scene, assigning officers to statements, footage preservation, and evidence collection. Price coordinated digital backups with Neil Porter, ensuring nothing accidentally disappeared later. Ramirez logged Ava's injuries with timestamps and photos. Reverend Brooks spoke to reporters outside, emphasizing accountability. Whitfield took calls, voice low, likely warning corporate headquarters. The mall's carefully polished image was cracking in real time, on live streams, in front of everyone who'd ever been dismissed. Inside, more angles of footage played, each one confirming Heather Caldwell's deliberate targeting. People in the crowd recognized her, murmuring about other incidents. A local civil rights attorney, Marcus Tate, arrived, already taking notes. "We've seen this pattern," he said quietly to Tessa. "The difference today is you've got evidence, witnesses, and the chief here." Tessa didn't look satisfied. She looked tired, because it shouldn't require power to get truth. Despite the chaos, Ava stayed centered. Her NASA shirt felt like a promise she refused to surrender. She looked around the room, the officials, the corporate lawyer, the mall owner, the accuser, the suspended officer, and saw how quickly the systems moved only when forced. "This can't just disappear," she said softly to her mother. Tessa squeezed her hand. "Then we make sure it doesn't," she answered, voice steady as steel. Tessa knelt beside Ava. "Do you want to go home, or do you want to see it through?" Ava scanned the room, eyes landing on Heather's pale face and Lawson's panic, then on the guards who looked ashamed. "I want to stay," Ava said, determination cutting through exhaustion. "If I leave, they'll file it away. Someone has to make sure they can't." Tessa nodded once, pride and pain mixing in her chest. Tessa stood and faced Chief Ortega. "We will file formal charges," she said, "against Heather Caldwell for false reporting, against Officer Hargrove for excessive force, and against Electromax and Westfield for discriminatory practices." Ortega didn't flinch. "We'll document everything," he replied. That's when two young women entered with Attorney Tate. They spotted Heather and gasped. "That's her," one whispered. "She accused me last month." The room went still as the pattern got faces. The women described near-identical scenes. Accusation, detention, embarrassment, then no accountability when items turned up. Heather's eyes darted, searching for escape routes that no longer existed. Gavin Caldwell's confidence collapsed into frantic whispers. Whitfield's phone kept buzzing. Tessa didn't interrupt the women. She let them speak, because this wasn't just Ava's story anymore. It was a system, finally forced into daylight. Hargrove, stripped of authority, tried to salvage pride by calling for backup earlier. Now those extra units stood awkwardly, unsure where to look. Ortega pulled them aside, issuing clear instructions. Preserve footage, separate witnesses, escort suspects, keep the crowd safe. The officers complied, tension draining when leadership was competent. Meanwhile, Price secured copies of the recorded staff meeting and the customer complaint history. The case file was growing teeth. Lawson attempted a new angle, claiming loss prevention best practices. Caleb Raines shook his head, voice cracking. "We were told to watch urban kids who didn't look like they belonged," he admitted. Another employee confirmed the directive and offered to forward emails. Benton's PR smile died completely. Reverend Brooks watched with grim satisfaction. Outside, supporters chanted louder, holding signs as reporters narrated the unfolding admissions. The story was no longer rumor. It was testimony. The ambulance team prepared to transport Ava. The medic advised observation due to shock symptoms. Tessa's face hardened with resolve. "I'm going with her," she said. She looked to Price. "Keep documenting statements and preserving evidence." Then to Ramirez. "Coordinate with Chief Ortega for records." Ortega nodded. "We'll handle the scene," he promised. Ava reached for Tessa's hand again, grip small but fierce. She wasn't done, but her body needed help. As Ava was moved toward the stretcher, Benton tried one last plea for quiet resolution. Tessa didn't even turn fully. Quiet is what allowed this, she said. Loud is what stops it. Whitfield looked like she wanted to argue, but cameras and witnesses boxed her in. Heather sat rigid, face ashen, realizing mistake wouldn't cover 7 complaints and a clear video. Price's phone buzzed with confirmation. Backups secure, logs preserved, chain of custody started. On the monitors, Lawson's earlier deletion attempt replayed alongside the court-ordered lock notice, proof of intent. Back in the room, Ava's breathing turned shallow and her skin went pale. The medic confirmed what Tessa already knew. Shock was setting in. Ambulance, now, Tessa repeated, voice unshakable. She chose her daughter over the spectacle because justice means nothing if it costs the person you're protecting. The stretcher rolled out, escorted by officers clearing a path through the crowd. People stepped aside, faces softening when they saw Ava's bandaged wrist. Some shouted support, some cried, some filmed. Tessa walked beside her, one hand on the rail, eyes scanning like a shield. Ava looked up at her mother. "I'm sorry," she whispered, like she'd done something wrong. Tessa shook her head. "You did everything right." Outside, sirens and news microphones overlapped. Reverend Brooks spoke to the cameras about accountability. Attorney Tate promised civil action alongside criminal charges. Chief Ortega coordinated with reporters at a distance, careful not to compromise the investigation. Inside the mall, security officers were being separated for interviews. Caleb Raines sat with shaking hands, ready to tell the truth fully. The culture of just follow orders was breaking in public. That mattered. Gavin Caldwell tried again to pull strings, boasting about a judge friend. Ortega responded with calm warning. "Interfering with an active investigation is a crime," Price added, "and your calls are being noted." Gavin finally went quiet. Heather stared at the floor, trapped by her own pattern. Whitfield's phone call tone grew urgent, corporate crisis mode. Benton looked like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. The mall's polished image couldn't survive this kind of daylight. Tessa paused near the ambulance doors, still tracking the scene with disciplined focus. "This isn't ending in a backroom settlement," she said to Price. "Not today." Ava listened, eyes heavy, but determined. "Make sure they don't erase it," she murmured. Price nodded. Ramirez confirmed the medical documentation was uploaded and time-stamped. Ortega assured them officers were collecting witness videos from shoppers, not confiscating, preserving. For once, the system was being forced to do its job. The crowd outside grew into a full-on protest. Signs, chants, live streams, local leaders arriving in waves. Some bystanders complained about disruption. Others joined in, furious and energized. The split reaction exposed deeper tension in the community, the kind usually whispered about, not broadcast. Today, it was broadcast. Inside, officers maintained a perimeter to prevent escalation. The situation was volatile, but controlled, because people were finally being listened to instead of dismissed. In the security office, Ortega delivered the final blow to Hargrove's pride. "You attempted to arrest a civilian for challenging your misconduct," he said. "That's unacceptable." Hargrove's face twisted with anger and disbelief. He'd expected fear. He got accountability. Ramirez documented his earlier movements toward his weapon, noted by multiple witnesses. Whitfield watched it all, expression tight, realizing the civil exposure was multiplying by the minute. This wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern, proven! As the ambulance loaded Ava, reporters shouted questions. Tessa didn't answer. She climbed in beside her daughter, clasping Ava's hand. Ava stared at the ceiling, exhausted and furious all at once. "I hate that you had to come like this," Ava whispered. Tessa's voice softened. "I hate that you had to call," she replied. "But you did the right thing. You spoke up, and now they can't pretend it didn't happen." The doors closed with a decisive thump. Chief Ortega remained behind, directing next steps. Heather detained for formal questioning, incident histories subpoenaed, store communications preserved, staff interviews scheduled. Price coordinated with corporate IT and mall servers to preserve logs. Whitfield requested a private conversation again. Ortega declined. "Transparency protects the public," he said. Outside, Reverend Brooks stayed with community members, keeping the protest focused and safe. The story had become bigger than one teen. It was about what happens when a system gets caught on camera. Back in the office, Hargrove stood stripped of a weapon and badge, isolated by his own choices. His earlier smirk looked like a bad memory now. The guards who dragged Ava in wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Lawson's face stayed chalky, trapped between denial and evidence. Heather's posture collapsed as she realized her routine play had finally hit a wall. Ortega spoke one last time to the room. "Every statement, every video, every log preserved. Nobody touches anything." Benton watched officers inventory incident reports like they were dismantling his business layer by layer. He whispered about brand reputation, but nobody cared. The reputation that mattered was the community's trust, and it had been damaged. Whitfield typed notes rapidly, likely preparing damage control strategy. Price quietly reminded everyone that deletions now equaled tampering. Neil Porter nodded repeatedly, eager to cooperate. The room had shifted from arrogance to compliance. The system wasn't working. It was being made to work. Reverend Brooks returned briefly to the doorway, looking at Ortega. "This is how we stop it," he said. Ortega answered without theatrics. "This is how we start." Officers escorted witnesses to separate rooms. Phones were collected only voluntarily for copying, then returned. A rare sense of procedural fairness finally appeared. Too late for the trauma, but not too late for accountability. The crowd outside cheered when news anchors confirmed Hargrove's suspension live on air. In the ambulance, Ava's eyes fluttered, fighting exhaustion. Tessa kept a steady hand on her daughter's wrist, careful not to touch the injuries. "You're safe," she repeated, like an order to the universe. Ava swallowed. "Promise me they'll change something." Tessa looked out the window at flashing lights and cameras. "We're going to push until they have to," she said. "Not because we're powerful, but because you're right." Ava's breathing steadied as the medic adjusted the monitor leads. She stared at her mother's blazer sleeve, noticing tiny creases from the rushed change, proof that even a colonel had to scramble when the world treated her child like disposable. Tessa leaned closer. "You did not deserve any of this," she said. Ava's voice was small, but firm. "Then let's make sure nobody else does, either." The ambulance turned onto the highway. Tessa interlaced her fingers with Ava's, anchoring her through the sirens and adrenaline crash. Outside, the city blurred past. Atlanta sunlight, traffic, a world that kept moving even when a teenager's dignity got shattered. Ava closed her eyes, exhausted but resolute. Tessa's voice stayed calm, a commander's promise and a mother's vow. "We're not letting them bury this. Not today. Not ever." "Mom," Ava said, voice steady despite the IV and the ache in her wrists. "This can't just be about me. We have to make sure they can't keep doing this to anyone else. Tessa squeezed her daughter's hand, pride and fury colliding. We will, she promised. It stops here. As the EMTs prepped the ambulance to roll, Gavin Caldwell made one last attempt to seize control. This is outrageous. My wife is the victim of a witch hunt. We'll sue everyone here, he blustered. Chief Ortega approached calmly. Mr. Caldwell, given your wife's documented pattern of false reports, we're investigating her for criminal charges. You might want a criminal defense lawyer, not a camera crew, Ortega added quietly. Outside, the crowd parted as paramedics wheeled Ava toward the ambulance. Colonel Tessa Morgan walked beside the gurney, posture razor straight despite the emotional wreckage inside. Behind them, Westfield churned with witnesses, evidence, and exposed bias no one could stuff back down. The situation in the mall kept snowballing. More bystanders stepped forward, more phone videos surfaced, and every new angle made Heather's lie look colder and more calculated. What began as a missing phone complaint from one privileged shopper had ripped the lid off a whole system that treated suspicious and black as interchangeable words. At Atlanta Memorial Hospital, the chaos of the mall gave way to buzzing monitors and antiseptic air. In a curtain bay, Ava sat on the exam table while a middle-aged black physician, Dr. Nadia Ellis, examined her wrists. A nurse meticulously photographed every cut, every bruise, documenting what the handcuffs had really done. These lacerations are consistent with restraints applied with excessive force, Dr. Ellis said clearly, for both chart and potential court. If they're not treated correctly, they'll leave permanent scarring. Tessa stood nearby, outwardly composed, but inside she felt the same tight, focused rage she'd known in combat, except this battlefield was her daughter's body. As Dr. Ellis worked, she glanced again at Ava's chart. Morgan, Westwood High, she asked. Ava nodded cautiously. The doctor's face softened. My daughter saw you at the regional science fair. She would not shut up about your solar energy project. Said you were beyond college level already. For once, Ava was seen as brilliant, not threatening. That simple acknowledgement shifted something inside her. Ava's shoulders straightened just as a detective stepped through the curtain, notebook ready. Ms. Morgan, I'm Detective Harris, he said. I'd like your statement. With the same precise focus she used in lab work, Ava walked him through everything, from entering Electromax to feeling the cuffs bite into her skin. You mentioned Officer Hargrove said something about your kind, the detective prompted. Can you remember his exact words? Ava repeated them verbatim, including the smug emphasis and the way he'd spat, people like you, the racism thinly disguised as professional skepticism. As she spoke, a hospital administrator hovered at the doorway, clearly waiting for Tessa. Colonel Morgan, there's an issue, the administrator said. Reporters are packing the lobby, and Officer Hargrove's union representative is demanding a conversation. Tessa exchanged a look with Detective Harris, then turned back to Ava. Laik, give us a minute, she told them. Once they were alone, she took Ava's uninjured hand and knelt closer. This is already bigger than either of us thought, Tessa admitted quietly. We could still settle privately, keep your name mostly out of the spotlight. Are you absolutely sure you want to keep pushing this? Ava met her gaze without flinching. You raised me to know comfort doesn't change anything that really matters. How many kids has this already happened to who don't have a mom who sits in Pentagon briefings? Ava asked. Pride pressed hard against Tessa's controlled expression. "All right," she said. "Then we do this properly." While Ava finished treatment, Tessa stepped into the hallway and dialed General Adrian Cole on a secure line. "Sir, the situation's escalated," she said crisply. "Local media involvement, clear racial profiling, and a military dependent injured in restraints. There's evidence of systemic bias at Westfield." She summarized Hargrove's suspension, Heather's history, and the mall's practices. Cole didn't hesitate. "This crosses into civil rights territory. You have backing from our legal and investigative teams." That classification transformed everything. Ava's ordeal was no longer just a local scandal. It was now a federal-level concern involving a service member's child. When Tessa returned to the room, Captain Sofia Ramirez was waiting with her tablet. "Colonel, we dug deeper into Hargrove. This is not his first problem with military families. Last year, there was an excessive force complaint from a Marine's son," Ramirez said. "It disappeared, record sealed. We're requesting access through military channels." At the same time, Chief Ortega initiated a department-wide review of every complaint attached to Hargrove's name, uncovering a pattern that had been buried under paperwork and union protection for years. The police union quickly fired back, issuing statements insisting Hargrove was a decorated veteran officer being smeared by outside agitators and sensational media. Back at Westfield, owner Malcolm Benton, suddenly aware of the financial danger, fired manager Trent Lawson after watching multi-store footage that showed the same racially skewed loss prevention tactics repeated. Heather and Gavin Caldwell's legal problems multiplied as new victims of Heather's false accusations came forward, including older teens from nearby bases. Electromax's corporate headquarters released a polished statement blaming local misjudgments and promising a nationwide security policy review. It sounded sincere on paper, but everyone knew they were racing to outrun a hashtag. Online torture justice for Ava exploded. Veterans, teachers, celebrities, and regular students boosted the story every hour. Outside Westfield, Ava's classmates organized a protest that ballooned into hundreds of people with homemade signs. Cameras captured everything: the chants, the tears, the anger, and the fierce determination on young faces tired of being treated like suspects first. When Ava was finally discharged that evening, her wrists wrapped in stark white bandages, she expected to go straight home. Instead, she found her AP chemistry teacher waiting in the lobby. Mr. Keller held a cardboard box. "Your classmates sent me," he said. "They gathered all the parts and prepped your project equipment. They said you should focus on healing while they handle the setup," he added with a small, proud smile. For the first time all day, Ava felt tears rise that weren't from pain or humiliation. Sometimes it isn't speeches or headlines that keep you going. It's a box of resistors and friends who refuse to disappear. The next morning, while Ava lay on the couch with textbooks nearby, Tessa took a call from Camille Roberts, a nationally known civil rights attorney. Roberts offered to represent Ava pro bono. "This case could set real precedent for how minors are detained and profiled in stores," she said, "and your daughter's composure is remarkable." Tessa admitted she'd considered taking a quiet settlement to protect Ava's privacy. Roberts didn't sugarcoat things. "Colonel, your daughter already understands what many adults don't," she said. "Big checks without structural change just pay for silence and clear the runway for the next victim." Later, at breakfast, Tessa repeated that conversation to Ava. Ava didn't hesitate. "She's right," she said. fingers brushing the gauze on her wrists. "If we take hush money, Heather will just pick another kid." Hargrove eventually gets his badge back. The mall just learns better hiding places for the same bias. Remember that quote in your office about good trouble? Tessa smiled sadly, recognizing John Lewis's words. "Good trouble, necessary trouble," she echoed. "Walking that path won't be easy. People will question your motives, twist your story, say you're overreacting." Ava nodded. "I know. But I also know who I am. That's more important to me than what strangers assume." Not long after, military investigators uncovered group chats linking Hargrove to several extremist circles, where he joked about cleaning up certain neighborhoods and mocked service members of color. That discovery shifted Ava's case yet again, suddenly pulling in domestic security units and stretching it far past ordinary misconduct or a simple bias training recommendation. Westfield Mall tried to preempt the damage by announcing sweeping reforms, new security protocols, mandatory bias training, and outside oversight. Electromax's parent company quietly put the entire regional management team on leave. But no one predicted the tidal wave of community support that followed, support that dwarfed every carefully worded corporate press release. 7 additional families stepped forward with nearly identical stories from the same mall, forming a support group overnight. Ava's principal, initially hesitant, released a strong statement publicly backing his star student and affirming her record. Around town, businesses started taping "Justice for Ava" signs in their windows, turning into clearly marked safe spaces. That evening, news vans still lined the street as Ava and Tessa sat with Major Darren Price and attorney Camille Roberts in their living room. "The mall's parent company is offering a very large settlement," Price explained. 7 figures, mandated policy changes, no admission of wrongdoing. Roberts listened quietly, then leaned forward. "A civil rights lawsuit could create binding precedent," Roberts said. "It could protect thousands of kids you'll never meet." Ava listened to both sides, then cut through the legal jargon with one question. Which choice does more to stop this from happening to another teenager who doesn't have my mom or my resources? Have you ever faced a choice like that, between protecting your own peace or fighting for something bigger? Comment 1 if you think Ava should take the settlement and move on, or 2 if you believe she should push for systemic change, even when it's harder. Hit subscribe to follow what happens next. A week after the incident, Ava sat at the kitchen table scrolling the news, frustration simmering behind her eyes. "Mom, look at this," she called. A local article headlined, "Questions about mall incident. Was it really profiling?" Anonymous sources hinted she'd behaved suspiciously, planting doubt about the very girl who'd been handcuffed. Similar pieces popped up on other sites, echoing the same talking points, almost word for word. Tessa read over her shoulder and instantly recognized a pattern. "They're trying to control the narrative," she said evenly. Classic counterintelligence tactic. A call from Major Price confirmed it. The police union had hired a crisis management firm to spin. The pushback didn't stop with media narratives. That morning, Tessa received a carefully worded email from a senior Pentagon official. While fully supporting her family, the message warned that the high-profile nature of the case was creating tension with local law enforcement and suggested a more discreet resolution might be in everyone's best interest. The translation was clear. Powerful people wanted this to quietly go away. As Ava prepared to return to school, she worried aloud, adjusting her backpack strap so it wouldn't press her wrists. "What if everyone's seen those articles?" she asked. "What if that's all they know?" Tessa hugged her. "Remember your record. Remember you." Westwood High mirrored the community divide. Some teachers welcomed Ava back warmly. Others stayed awkwardly distant. After AP Chemistry, Mr. Keller pulled her aside. "Staff are split," he admitted. "Some think you should have handled it privately. Others are proud you stood up." Ava nodded, swallowing the sting of being turned into a debate topic. Students were just as divided. Her close friends closed ranks around her, walking the halls like a protective shell. But Ava still heard whispers at nearby tables. "My dad says her mom is just chasing attention," one girl muttered. "Military people always think they're above everyone." The words cut, but Ava kept her posture steady. After school, the blow landed where it hurt most. An email from the prestigious Brennan Science Scholarship Committee said they were reevaluating applications in light of recent events, a thinly disguised reference to her case. That scholarship had been Ava's golden ticket to her dream universities. Now, even that path felt shaky and conditional. That evening, an unmarked envelope appeared on their doorstep. Inside were printed screenshots of racist online comments and veiled threats aimed at Ava and Tessa. Tessa immediately contacted security specialists from her unit. Within hours, military personnel arrived to assess the house, reinforce cameras, and quietly establish a protection plan around their home. "This is textbook intimidation," Captain Ramirez explained as she helped install additional equipment. "They want you tired, scared, and willing to make this all disappear." Meanwhile, Tessa's own career felt the strain. A scheduled promotion review was suddenly postponed. In private, General Cole remained supportive, but his official messages grew carefully neutral and political. "The landscape is complicated," he said on a secure call. "Some influential people frame this as anti-police instead of anti-discrimination." Within days, local news aired a sympathetic feature on the toll of false accusations against officers, spotlighting Hargrove's family and describing his 20 years of service, conveniently skipping his stack of buried complaints. Heather also took her turn in front of cameras, delivering a teary interview about an honest misunderstanding that had ruined her life. She painted herself as the real victim of a social media mob. Around the same time, Westfield's lawyers sent an amended settlement offer. More money, plus a sweeping non-disclosure agreement to muzzle Ava and Tessa. That same week, someone tried to corrupt the original Electromax footage, damaging segments that showed Heather planting her phone and singling out Ava. Luckily, Ramirez had already pushed multiple copies through military channels. Their backups were clean, time-stamped, and secure, turning the attempted cover-up into yet another piece of damning evidence against the system. The most personal blow came when Ava's scholarship application was officially deferred pending character review. The timing made the connection obvious, yet amidst the pressure, unexpected allies appeared. 3 of Tessa's former special operation teammates, now in private security, volunteered to help guard the house. Teachers from other schools sent messages of open support. Several of Ava's classmates formed a dedicated study group, determined that her grades wouldn't suffer because she dared to speak up. Then the harassment escalated. One evening, returning from a meeting with their attorneys, Tessa and Ava found their front door spray-painted with racial slurs and threats. The violation cut deeper than any headline. As they scrubbed the vandalism off together under porch lights, Ava finally let the exhaustion show. "Mom, is this worth it?" she whispered. "Maybe we should just take the settlement." Tessa set down the rag and faced her directly. "That's exactly what they want. For decent people to decide justice costs too much." She gestured to the half-cleaned door. "This is fear talking, not power. They're not scared of us individually. They're scared of what happens when people like us refuse to be quiet." After a long moment, Ava nodded. "Like your other quote," she said softly. "The one about evil winning when good people do nothing." Tessa smiled with fierce pride. "Exactly. But this has to be your choice," she said. "If you want to accept the settlement and walk away, I'll back you completely. Your safety comes first." Ava looked at her healing wrists, then at the hateful words still faintly visible. Instead of answering, she went to her room. She returned carrying her laptop and opened a document. Rows of dated entries filled the screen. "I've been keeping this for years," Ava explained. "Every time I experienced or watched something like this, teachers doubting me, guards following us, store clerks hovering, I wrote it down. If we stop now, all of this stays hidden too." The determination in her eyes matched Tessa's. That night, they made their decision together. They wouldn't be bought, they wouldn't be quiet. Whatever the cost, they would see the case through. They emailed Roberts and Major Price, confirming no settlement with silence attached. The next morning, they woke to an unexpected show of force. A line of veterans from different branches stood outside their house, already scrubbing away the last traces of vandalism. A retired Marine sergeant stepped forward. "Colonel, word got around," he said. "We figured you and your girl could use some backup." Similar gestures spread through the community. Handwritten signs, donated services, messages of encouragement. Law students volunteered to help organize evidence. 3 former targets of Heather Caldwell's fake accusations formed a small support group, offering formal statements and solidarity. Tessa stood in her home office surrounded by affidavits from veterans who'd been profiled in uniform. On her screen, a secure chat linked military contacts watching extremist reactions to the case. The doorbell rang. Retired Master Sergeant Harold King, who'd served with Tessa in 3 combat zones and now led a veterans advocacy network, stepped inside. "The network's activated," he reported. "We've got veterans in 17 states logging similar incidents. 4 former JAG attorneys just volunteered. Some intel folks are quietly feeding context, off the books." Across town, Ava poured her organizational skills into action at school. During lunch, she sat with a diverse group of students, the newly formed Student Coalition Against Discrimination. "We've documented 37 incidents at local businesses in the last year," said Luis Alvarez, a senior who'd been profiled at Westfield. Most people just swallowed it. "We built a secure form so they could finally report it," he added. Ava scrolled through their database, brain already categorizing. "We need to sort by location, business type, and employee behavior," she said. "Patterns matter. That's how we prove this isn't just a few bad days, it's a system." Even the seniors looked impressed. After school, an unexpected ally intercepted her near the parking lot. Brad Reynolds, the younger security guard who had helped detain her, approached nervously. "Ava, wait," he said. "I've been trying to reach you." He handed her a small thumb drive. "This is a full backup of mall security footage from that day, every camera." "There are feeds they never mention," Brad continued. I copied everything before management could touch it. And there's more. He swallowed. I recorded staff meetings, saved emails, every time they told us to shadow certain types of shoppers. Ava studied him. Why now? Brad's voice cracked. Because I watched them cuff a kid who did nothing wrong. I can't undo that, he said, but I can help expose it. The thumb drive turned out to be a gold mine. When Tessa passed it to Major Price, his eyes widened. Footage clearly showed Lawson directing guards to trail customers based solely on appearance. The files matched stories from other victims almost perfectly. Meanwhile, Ramirez dug deeper into Hargrove's past. Colonel, we've confirmed troubling connections, she reported over a secure call. We tied him to 3 extremist organizations through personal email and chat logs. Military intelligence flagged him before for comments about service members of color. This isn't just a bad cop, it's a potential security threat. That shifted the investigation again, opening channels far beyond standard internal affairs procedures. The alliance kept growing. Electromax employees quietly forwarded internal memos describing unofficial instructions about suspicious shoppers. A corporate whistleblower revealed similar directives at multiple locations, contradicting headquarters claims that this was an isolated store problem rather than a baked-in business model. National civil rights organizations reached out, offering media training to Ava and Tessa so hostile interviews wouldn't catch them off balance. They connected them with families in other states who'd lived the same script: false suspicion, humiliating detention, no accountability. A loose network of people scarred by profiling slowly came together, sharing strategies instead of shame. The biggest shock came when General Cole made a rare public statement at a Pentagon briefing. The United States military stands firmly against discrimination in all forms, he said. Mistreatment of military dependents based on race isn't just a civil matter. It affects morale and readiness. He never said Ava's name, but everyone understood. The effect was immediate. The police department announced mandatory bias training, new review protocols, and community oversight for complaints. Westfield's parent company, hammered by shareholder concerns and calls for boycotts, rolled out sweeping policy changes, independent audits, revamped security contracts, and explicit bans on profiling. Other retailers quietly began updating their own protocols, hoping to avoid similar scrutiny. Local businesses started displaying safe space decals, promising staff training and non-discriminatory service. Even Ava's school shifted. The principal, who had been notably silent at first, issued a public apology and sent letters reinforcing Ava's scholarship recommendations, with additional endorsements from the entire science department. Support was turning into structural change, not just hashtags. Town halls sprang up across the city. Residents from different backgrounds shared stories that had never left their kitchens before. Veterans spoke about serving a flag that didn't always protect their families. Parents described the talks they had to have with their kids about staying alive in situations that should have been perfectly ordinary. Through it all, Ava stayed grounded. In national interviews, she kept steering the conversation away from her own trauma and back towards systems. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about patterns we've normalized. If people who look like me are always treated as suspects first, that's not safety. That's discrimination." As the court date approached, the alliance made itself visible. Thousands gathered peacefully outside the courthouse. Students, veterans, church groups, neighbors. Many wore shirts reading "Believe Ave" or "End Mall Profiling." Speaker after speaker described their own encounters, weaving a mosaic of stories that proved Ava's case wasn't an anomaly. It was a mirror. Heather and Officer Hargrove arrived to a wall of signs and cameras, looking smaller than they ever had. For maybe the first time, they realized they weren't the quiet majority. They were the ones being scrutinized. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Judge Elaine Peterson, silver-haired and no-nonsense, surveyed the room with practiced authority. "This court will maintain order regardless of the attention surrounding this case," she said firmly. The proceedings began with technical testimony. Experts authenticated the untouched security footage, showing Heather placing her phone in her bag, then theatrically discovering it missing. Attempts by the defense to suggest manipulation fell apart under timestamps and digital audit trails. Medical staff testified next, explaining Ava's wrist injuries. Dr. Ellis described the lacerations as inconsistent with routine restraint and consistent with punitive pressure. Photos of angry red marks filled the courtroom screens. Hargrove sat stone-faced beside his union attorney. Heather dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed tissue as evidence piled up around her. Store manager Trent Lawson looked physically sick while emails he'd sent were read aloud, detailing instructions to watch urban teens and people who don't look like they belong. When Ava took the stand, the room went silent. With extraordinary composure for an 18-year-old, she laid out the events clearly. No drama, no exaggeration, just facts. "At first I was just confused," she testified, recalling being grabbed. "Then I was scared, because it hit me that no matter how hard I worked, some people would always see me as suspicious." Asked about the impact, she didn't flinch. "I had to question whether merit matters if prejudice can override it instantly." The defense tried to paint her as an attention-seeking activist. Ava's careful answers, stellar academic record, and calm demeanor made that narrative crumble. Then Tessa testified. "I've served through 3 combat tours," she said. "I've risked my life for values like justice and equality. To see my daughter bleeding in cuffs at a mall." Her voice tightened, but didn't break. "That's a betrayal of those values." When asked whether her rank intimidated local officials, Tessa answered evenly. "My rank only became relevant after they mocked it. Any parent, regardless of title, should expect their child to receive basic dignity and due process, not humiliation and violence." The court watched the merged camera footage in full. Heather stashing her phone, scanning for a target, bypassing white teens, pointing to Ava, guards seizing her, Hargrove tightening cuffs on a cooperative girl, security ignoring her pleas to check the video. The more complete the picture became, the less room there was for excuses. After 3 days of testimony, Judge Peterson delivered her ruling. This court finds Officer Derek Hargrove liable for civil rights violations, excessive force, and failure to follow procedure, she said. He was suspended without pay, pending extensive bias training and psychological evaluation. Future law enforcement employment would require court approval, not just a department recommendation. She turned to Heather. Heather Caldwell is found guilty of filing a false police report, attempting to tamper with evidence, and wasting police resources. Heather received 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service with youth organizations, and mandatory counseling focused on bias and accountability. The courtroom murmured as consequences finally landed. Addressing corporate representatives, Judge Peterson continued, Electromax and Westfield Mall are liable for maintaining discriminatory security practices. She ordered 5 years of court-supervised reforms, including independent audits, transparent complaint processes, and staff retraining. She also mandated a $1 million scholarship fund for minority students to be named in honor of Ava Morgan and other profiled youths. Compensation was ordered for every identified victim of similar profiling incidents at the mall. As the judge spoke, Ava reached for Tessa's hand. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally seeing accountability reach beyond one woman and one officer to the structures that had quietly protected them for so long. Judge Peterson ended with a broader message. Discrimination is rarely one dramatic incident, she said. It is the accumulation of tolerated practices shielded by systems that normalize unequal treatment. This ruling addresses not only individual actions, but the mechanisms that allowed them to repeat without consequence. The courtroom sat in reflective silence at her words. The impact spread fast. The police department implemented new review boards with community members, overhauled complaint procedures, and required ongoing bias training rather than one-time workshops. Retailers across the region adopted clearer anti-profiling policies and standardized review processes. Lawyers began citing Ava's case in lawsuits challenging discriminatory detentions in malls nationwide. Ava later testified before a congressional committee on retail discrimination. Her calm explanation of what happened and why it mattered helped push forward federal legislation proposing clear guidelines and penalties for discriminatory security practices. Far from damaging Tessa's military career, the case led to her promotion and a new assignment focused on protecting military families' rights. She was tasked with leading a specialized task force addressing civil rights issues affecting service members and their dependents. 1 year after the incident, Ava stood in the very mall where she'd once been marched in cuffs. The old security office was now a community resource center. A banner overhead read, Ava Morgan Scholarship Awards. Real change isn't about punishing individuals. It's about transforming systems, Ava told the audience of students, community leaders, and reporters. What happened to me wasn't unique. What's unusual is that we refuse to let it be buried. She announced the first 10 scholarship recipients, kids who'd faced obstacles, yet still chased their academic dreams. Ava's acceptance into Johns Hopkins Medical Research Program meant her own dreams remained intact, despite everything. The mall where she'd been humiliated now displayed training materials that had become a national model. The once intimidating security office housed mentorship programs, tutoring, and workshops on knowing your rights. The place had literally and symbolically changed. Some surprising transformations happened among those originally involved. Brad Reynolds, the guard who brought the thumb drive, now led trainings on how to maintain safety without profiling. A few officers from Hargrove's former department became internal reform advocates, pushing for transparency. The story showed that accountability doesn't just punish. It can also reshape people and culture. The deepest shift was visible in everyday life. Subtle slights that used to pass unchallenged were now called out. Young people of all backgrounds moved through stores with a little more confidence that if something went wrong, people would ask questions instead of looking away. Ava's case hadn't fixed everything, but it had raised the standard. Watching her daughter speak at the ceremony, Tessa thought back to that first phone call from the mall. A single moment of injustice had sparked veteran networks, legal teams, student coalitions, and policy reform. The journey had been brutal, but necessary. This fight, she realized, had never been just for Ava. It was for everyone coming after. What would you have done in Ava's position? Would you have taken the money and tried to forget, or stood up for something bigger knowing the backlash would come? Drop a comment sharing a time you saw or experienced discrimination and how you responded, or how you wish you had responded instead. If this story pushed you to recognize unfair treatment in your own school, workplace, or neighborhood, hit like so more people see it. Subscribe for more real stories that challenge us to build a fairer world. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one voice can spark a much larger change. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, dignity, and relentless persistence. Ava and Colonel Tessa Morgan showed that justice isn't automatic. It's something people have to insist on, again and again. Discrimination survives in silence. It crumbles when exposed, challenged, and refused. Their good trouble became the beginning of something bigger. This case reminds us that the systems around us don't transform on their own. They change when people who've been told to stay quiet instead speak up, document everything, build alliances, and demand accountability. Real justice is more than punishing bad actors. It's dismantling the structures that allowed them to act with impunity. So think about it. When have you had to choose between staying comfortable and standing up for what's right? Did you speak out, or did fear win that day? There's no shame in being honest about it, but there is power in deciding what you'll do next time. Your future choices still matter. If you've ever watched discrimination unfold and felt powerless, remember Ava. She was just a teenager who refused to accept being treated like a suspect for existing. Her courage sparked investigations, policies, scholarships, and conversations far beyond her city. One person can't fix everything, but one person can start a chain reaction. Tap that like button if you believe people should be judged by their character and actions instead of their appearance. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't just entertain, but challenge, provoke, and inspire. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs encouragement to stand up when something feels deeply wrong. Because at the end of the day, justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when ordinary people decide that staying silent is no longer an option, that necessary trouble is worth the cost, and that systems only change when we insist they must. Thanks for being part of this conversation and this ongoing fight for fairness. Remember, you don't have to be a colonel, a lawyer, or a viral hashtag to matter. You just have to be willing to notice, to care, and to act when you see someone treated as less than. Ava's story proves that even the targets of injustice can become architects of a more just future. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Talk to your friends, your family, your coworkers. Ask how bias shows up in your community and what concrete steps you can take together. Justice isn't one big heroic moment. It's a series of choices we make every single day together. Thank you for staying with this story from that first humiliating accusation to the final hard-won reforms. If you're ready to keep learning, listening, and pushing for better, make sure you're subscribed. And remember, necessary trouble doesn't mean reckless chaos. It means intentional, courageous action aimed at building something fairer than what existed before. So what will your necessary trouble look like? Will it be speaking up when a coworker is stereotyped, intervening when someone's harassed at a store, or supporting policies that protect vulnerable people? Whatever it is, don't underestimate it. Change is built out of 1,000 small, brave decisions stacked together. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share a moment you chose courage or a moment you wish you had. Your story might be the one that pushes someone else to act when it's their turn. Together, those moments create the kind of cultural shift laws alone can never fully deliver. If you're committed to challenging unfair treatment wherever you see it, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. We'll keep bringing you narratives that shine light into dark corners and remind all of us that justice isn't abstract, it's personal, practical, and urgently needed. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their voice matters, that speaking up at the right time might protect someone they'll never meet. Let Ava and Tessa's journey be a blueprint, not just a story. Ordinary people, plus documented truth, plus relentless persistence can absolutely shift what's considered acceptable. Thanks again for watching this story of Ava Morgan, Colonel Tessa Morgan, and the alliance that formed around them. Their fight shows that while prejudice is persistent, so is courage. When enough people decide that injustice is no longer normal, systems bend. Stay aware, stay loud, and never be afraid of necessary trouble. For those of us in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, Ava's story reminds us that dignity can be taken in a moment, even from a child who has done everything right. Many of you marched, voted, and prayed through the civil rights era, yet here is a young honors student in a NASA t-shirt, bleeding in handcuffs in a suburban mall because someone decided her presence looked wrong. Justice, we learn again, is fragile and must be defended in every generation. Tessa shows the power of seasoned courage joined with community. She doesn't storm in swinging. She documents, calls allies, demands policy, and insists that the truth be preserved instead of buried. Older Americans know this rhythm well. Change lasts when we combine calm resolve, clear records, and neighbors who refuse to look away. The long aftermath, smear campaigns, threats, lost opportunities, then reforms, scholarships, and new laws speaks to what many of you already understand. Transformation is a marathon, not a sprint. Setbacks do not mean the fight is wasted. They mean the system is pushing back. Ava and Tessa choose good trouble, not for headlines, but so grandkids you may rock on your lap one day can walk into any store and be treated as they deserve, with simple, ordinary respect. After hearing Ava and Tessa's journey, from a simple trip to the mall to a fight that changed policies and opened doors for other kids, I'd love to hear from you. If you were in their shoes, at your age today, would you push for public, system-wide change, or protect your peace and accept a quiet settlement? Have you ever faced a moment where speaking up felt costly, but staying silent felt wrong? Share your story in the comments, tap like, and please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations like this one.